Hey folks, this is the last time I'm gonna try to make this video. I've tried it. This will be the third time, okay? And I got interrupted in the last one, and it's really hard to explain what I want to talk about here. And basically, eventually, I'm gonna get to the being able to adjust both throttle shafts independently with this BLP base plate, because this has a screw for the backside that you can adjust independently. Really cool feature of that BLP base plate, because your curb is obviously adjusted with either one of these screws, your primary side screw or your secondary side screw. But there's a relationship between them having to do with the exposure of the transfer slot, and you want to get it right. So I think I'll just go into that right now, actually. Um, your this car make noises when you lean on. I thought somebody's coming out again. If you don't have transfer slot exposure correct, you'll either be way too rich because you got too much, or you'll be, if you don't have any, you'll have an air bog when you snap the throttle opener. The throttle opener, when you snap the throttle open. Now that's on the primary side, obviously, because it's progressive linkage and the backside doesn't open for quite a while. But you don't want to have an air bog there. So you need some exposure. And roughly it should be like perfect square below the blade. But you might not have the right idle speed when you get this. It might be too high, it might be too low. So you can, with this option, it allows you to trim, you can trim both blades a little bit, or both shafts. You can trim them both down a little. Basically, you can, to put it in the best words I can describe, because this is a difficult subject to kind of explain, having the option to do both shafts at once, I can trim a lot of air without trimming a lot of transfer slot exposure. By a little bit of turn on both, right, it'll close both sets of throttle blades and cut down quite a bit of air compared to the exposure of your transfer slot, which will cut down idle RPM, but still give you transfer slot exposure. Now, there's also the relationship between the two, and you can do one more than the other, or back and forth. You know, you have to mess with your own setup. And this is where I got in the weeds with the last two times I tried to do this, because it becomes very obscure, me trying to explain this. But once you get the car pretty much squared away, you can mess with the relationship between the two shafts, and it will affect your air-fuel ratio at like city cruising or highway cruising more than you'd think due to the transfer slot exposure. So you got to keep, if you have that ability with a dual adjuster, keep that in mind, that that is also a tool to trim your exposure of transfer slot and how much fuel that you have at those cruising speeds. It's super good tool. And like I said, here's where it gets in the weeds. You got to mess with your own. I can't really give you advice other than what I just did about how it can be used as a tool. You have to mess with your own setup, and it'll help trim what you got. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it. But I would replace a standard Holley with that base plate, hands down, just for that option. It's a really good base plate, actually. It came with the 93 thousandths holes in the blades for these bigger engines. That way, you can, I don't know if you can see them in there, bypass holes. The better carbs, you have a bypass in here to give you more air. But that works pretty good. And that, because that's a real pain in the butt job if you try to do it yourself. But these bigger engines need a lot of air, and if you open up the throttle blades, you're just going to get more transfer slots fuel, and it's not the way to do it. So with all that said, BLP base plate, awesome piece, really good quality, kind of cool color too. I like the anodized job they do is pretty awesome. So anyway, I got this pretty well narrowed in. You'll see my jet size has changed a little bit. Pretty much square jetted. The only reason it's not square jetted is because I didn't have another set of 82s. That little bit extra in the back isn't, that doesn't matter. You barely ever use that anyway, like unless you're doing full throttle blasts. I tried 81 jets in the front, and it was usable for sure, but it got just a hair lean at certain points. And there was a little bit too much needle wavering in the air-fuel ratio gauge for my liking. So I just bumped it up one size, which does make a difference when you got an air-fuel ratio gauge. It's like, I don't know, one size might change your stuff 5%, maybe 3 to 5%. You can see it'll dampen. Like if you get lean, you'll have kind of extreme waves in the needle sometimes. Go back a size, it'll every time you go fatten back up, it'll calm down how the needle moves. So one jet size does make a difference. But anyway, the big deal I did with this to get it where it's better is transfer slot restrictors. I showed you making them in another video. I went from 69 to 64 thousandths in the primary side, because that's basically 99% of my driving is on the front 500 CFM on this. And that was roughly 10% smaller on each transfer slot. And it made quite a difference. The car doesn't really stink. I mean, you can still smell the exhaust. It's an old big engine, but it's a lot better. My clothes didn't have any type of raw fuel exhaust smell on it anymore, which is a huge, huge upgrade. I only pulled 2 spark plugs. One looked pretty good. The other one was like half good. For some reason, this, what is it up there? Number 3 always has half the what do you call it? The insulator inside that's exposed underneath the electrode tip. I'll cut a picture in. It's not going to be that spark plug, though. I didn't take a picture of it. Half of it's darker than the other half's lighter. I don't know how the fuel comes in the cylinder or what, but anyway. So I did that particular cylinder 3 and maybe 1, or 3 and 2 here, I think, are fed off of this barrel. So I turned down this guy like an 1/8 of a turn, just a little bit, to see if that maybe helped. But anyway, in the weeds there. Yeah, it has pretty good. I mean, I was getting driving around the city air fuel ratios of 14.5 to over 15.5 to 1 sometimes, just kind of coasting and cruising, which is totally acceptable. If you look at modern fuel injected engines, they do that all the time. Not under power, obviously, but and oddly enough, with the timing events on this now, or not events, but the spark timing on this now, it's closer to an LS engine, modern-wise. The timing that I've looked at and what I could use if I did have a vacuum advance, and they like lower timing, and as well, this new combustion chamber designs and these Indy heads like lower timing. So it's pretty good, man. I can't argue. I can't complain too much. The only thing I have to square away with this is maybe still having a little bit of drip out of these when I get on it a little heavy. That should be addressed. And my rear main seal has to be fixed because I bought the better seal retainer, and now it leaks. That's always awesome. Anyway, right before the driving season ends here, I got this pretty well tuned. And it's awesome how, if you watched my video about the low car kickdown cable, once you get the kickdown cable and the timing and the carb all kind of really good and squared away, it goes from frustration to bing. My car is pretty awesome. It drives around good. It's like a flip of a switch. It's weird how, some small adjusting makes or breaks the animal. A few small adjustments out of whack and it's a mess. You fix them and you're good. Anyway, that's about all I have for you today here. Near 10-minute video. Later.